1. This actually happened in 2011 while I was stationed in Pearl Harbor. My friend and I wanted to go hiking, and I was off watch at 1:30 p.m. He picks me up and we decide to go hike behind Camp Erdman. That's what is basically a dried up riverbed between two mountain ridges, and what used to be waterfalls are now more of a series of steps, for lack of a better term. Some climbers rigged ropes so you could walk up the dried riverbed and descend the rock faces. It's got some pretty good scenery, so myself, Nathan, and a Marine whose name I can't remember, and another Navy friend whose name I also can't remember, went for the hike. We got to the spot around 3 p.m. After the second rock face, there was no longer ropes leading up. The third rock face may have been 30 to 40 feet high. Nathan tries using the ridge on one side of the riverbed to slowly climb up and make it to the next highest level of the riverbed. However, there wasn't enough of a path. He talks about climbing higher, but none of us think it's a good idea. He convinces us to climb up the mountain on the other side of the riverbed, because it had more trees and vegetation and would be easier, so we do. What I did not realize is that when climbing a mountain like that, you can't see the top. So, after about an hour, the other Navy kid drops out. Nathan keeps saying, "We're almost at the top," and for some reason those words made it seem like a good idea to continue climbing. At around 5:30, our Marine friend says it's gonna get dark before we get to the top and tries to convince us to turn around. At this point I was determined, so he turned back while Nathan and myself pushed on. I don't know what time we actually reached the top, but we did, exhausted, and the sun was going to be setting soon. We looked down the way we climbed up and quickly realized it was simply not going to happen. So we walked along the ridge until we found a muddy runoff that allowed us to slide back into the riverbed, albeit at a higher altitude and further back from the camp. We walked towards the camp until we got to the first rock face. It was maybe 25 feet high. We could see the lights from the camp as it was getting dark now, and that convinced us that we could make it back. We climbed down the face carefully. Neither of us is a professional climber, nor did we have any equipment beyond backpacks, snacks, and water, and into the lower riverbed. I think we repeated this 1 or 2 more times before it was pitch black and could not see the bottom of the rock face. It was now pitch black. An argument begins between us. I want to call for rescue, he wants to climb down. I throw a rock down and estimate that we are at least 50 to 60 feet up, and that it was way too far to even think about climbing down. Nathan talks me up and convinces me to try. We explore for ways down, looking for hand and footholds, and can't agree on a way down, so we each take the way we thought safest. Nathan climbs around on the rocks on the side of the riverbed. I climb straight down via a series of rocks and roots. We are about 30 feet apart, and he is 10 to 15 feet higher than me to my right, when I have my foot on a rock and swing over to grab what appeared to be a large, firm root. I hear Nathan say, "Rob, I think I found a way down," when the root under my hand snaps, and I begin to fall. I cut off his sentence with what he described as a very serious, deliberate look right into his eyes, signaling that I had accepted my death, and very calmly stated the word, "shit." I fell what I estimate to be 5 to 12 feet when something slammed under my armpit and clung on for quite literally my, not so, dear life. I hyperventilated for a few, saying, "I'm done," between breaths, and slowly climbed my way back up. A random branch had just saved me. Somehow, climbing down or calling for rescue was still an argument. Nathan was convinced the way he was taking was the way down, so I give in. We end up going his way and sliding down a muddy and grassy ledge and falling, almost to our deaths again, but instead landing on a 2x4 tiny little rock ledge. I was too slippery to climb back up, and after about 10 minutes of dangling and looking around for anything to help us get down, I finally heard Nathan say we might be stuck. We argued over a helicopter rescuer and whether or not it was going to cost us anything, and whether or not we would get in trouble with our command, but he eventually gave in and called 911. They sent out a helicopter to look for us, which got nowhere close to us and left. We called back. They said they couldn't see us, so we stayed on the phone the second time and directed the helicopter towards us. They said they saw us, but we would have to wait until morning for the rescue. Otherwise it was dangerous in the dark. It was now 9:45 p.m, so we waited. It got a little chilly and was awkward sitting there back to back on this tiny ledge. Wet, being eaten alive by bugs, hoping no centipedes or scorpions would wander by. Most of the night was spent in silence. We called at daybreak around 7:30 a.m. when it was finally light enough, and the helicopter came back out and left again. We called back. They said that they actually didn't find us the previous night and couldn't see us, and asked us if we could go somewhere more visible. We hung up and very carefully dragged ourselves back up the muddy ledge and climbed back into the dried riverbed. The rescue personnel descended and scolded us for climbing in what was very clearly labelled a no climbing and hiking zone because of how dangerous it was. Then they asked us where we left our gear. We proceeded to tell them we didn't have any. One of the guys looked at me and laughed and said, "No, really, you don't want to leave your gear up here. If it's nearby, we can go get it." Me and Nathan looked at each other, confused, and reiterated that we made it up there with absolutely no gear. The rescue guy seemed annoyed, and stated that he has found experienced climbers up there dead, which is why it's a no hiking and climbing zone, and that he did not believe that we came up there without gear, but was okay if we wanted to pretend we made it up there without any. I climbed into the basket first as the helicopter lifted me up and dropped me at a clearing that was remarkably close to Nathan's car. I waited for them to go back and get Nathan. I took some videos of the whole ordeal. Our faces and arms were covered in bug bites. We were asked our names, where we lived, our commanding officer, and then just sent on our way. We never got a bill, the command never got a bill, and other than the day after it happened when my NCOIC, Joint Command, questioned how the hell it had all happened. I never heard anything else about it again. Oh, and about 3 hours after the rescue, when I reported to watch, LT looked at me and said, "Jesus Christ, Green, what the fuck happened to your face? Did you spend the night in the woods or something?" And for the first and only time in my life, I laughed so hard I fell on the floor. I like to chalk the whole experience up to I went through a shit show for a really cool ride in the basket of a helicopter. 2. This fuck up, like many others, happened a while ago. I just moved to a new school, a quite small one, and was in the 8th grade when this happened. Now it was a couple of weeks into the new school year, and I'm trying to make friends. So for pretty much my entire life I've gone by a nickname which is Bear. Now starting a new school, I thought that'd be a good name to go by at this school. And it was. I was on the football team, wasn't hard, very small school, literally just showed up like no tryouts. Also I was ineligible to play, so I'm basically a glorified water boy. So a couple games go by and it's time for our homecoming game. And can you believe it? We are playing against the Bears. Now the whole theme of the week is going on a bear hunt. And well, that's what happens. So the end of the week is coming up and our school is going to have a big parade type thing. And to end it off, the students are going to go on a bear hunt. Sort of like a terrible obstacle course. So here comes the fuck up. I sort of liked a girl who was a cheerleader. So she and some others asked if I wanted to be a bear in this big event. I reply with heck yeah. So I find like a bear hat thing, like a bear beanie thing, and wore that to really immerse myself as the bear. It's all gonna work out, I thought. This is gonna be cool. I'm gonna be noticed. Now I'm also a football player, so I have to walk in the parade before the course, while wearing the hat. It's also summer, so it's quite hot. Also our team got jackets, I kid you not. I wore it every day until the football season ended, and I was wearing the jacket because that was my thing. So I'm wearing a bear beanie and jacket in the heat. Here comes the true fuck up. I finish my walk in the parade, and then follow some cheerleaders to the end of the course, it's on the football field, to wait. I look up at the bleachers and I see all the families and students waiting. I listen to the cheerleaders explain how the course works and how to compete. It finally dawns on me what's gonna happen when they reach me. So the students, not just small children but older students too, make their way through the course. I'm just staring at them. They get closer with each objective completed. I'll be honest, I was scared. A huge mass of children and teens making their way towards me was unsettling. They were all quite angry at me. I was the villain. So they're basically a mob chanting about hunting me. "We're going on a bear hunt," I keep hearing as they approach me. When they do arrive to where I am swamped by what felt like millions of children with balloons. They all just keep hitting me with balloons, not like throwing them, but basically a punch cushioned by a balloon. I don't know if you've been hit by a ton of balloons all at once. It hurts. But it only got worse. 2 children grabbed my legs, 1 child for each leg, and 1 on my waist, all while being hit by balloons. Now one of my friends gut punches me pretty early on before the children grasp me. It's when a second friend hits me it all goes south. I mean, it's the perfect crime. No one could prove that I was just punched in the gut. There's tons of people around me. I begin to crumple like a deflated balloon. So I instinctively grab a true friend's arm and I say, "Get this hat off me." He rips it off my head and gives it to someone. I can't remember why I did this. I just wanted that hat safe. Anyway, I begin crumpling as my friend can't give me real support because there's so many people trying to hit me. So I knew I couldn't just crush the kids on my body. So I mustered all my remaining strength and half stood while I waited for someone to get them off me. I'm screaming, "Help me, please!" And somebody eventually does, or the kids realize I'm falling and get off. When the last kid is off me, I collapse, not like passing out just from pain and exhaustion. I ended up with a few bruises. Also, no, it didn't work out with the cheerleader, if you were wondering. 3. Obviously this was like 28 years ago, so it's not today. My friend, Jay we'll call him, and I were celebrating our 8th grade graduation. Or maybe it was his mother's wedding. Or maybe something else, who the hell knows. It's not important what we were celebrating, except that we were alone in his house, hanging out, being stupid. After smoking cigarettes only of course, we lost a lighter eventually and Jay pulled out some Strike Anywhere matches. For the uninformed, phosphorus is what makes Strike Anywhere matches different. It burns a hell of a lot faster than wood or paper, and hotter. Strike Anywhere matches are full of it. In the course of time, we're lighting the matches off of everything, of course. Our teeth, across our fingernails, the walls, whatever. Totally amazed by this marvel of science. All of these matchsticks go into a giant 1970s ashtray when we blow them out. It looks, after we're done, like a giant pile of kindling. I think the matches used to come in 300 match boxes, and we had gone through half of one just playing around. Now we have this giant ashtray in the middle of the living room, and recognize a certain campfire vibe. Keep in mind that there's a fireplace just a few feet from us, and we've built fires before, alone and unattended, and have often camped together unattended, and don't think anything of building a fire. All this kindling should be put to good use, we decide. Let's roast some marshmallows. The first couple only get half done. Have to wait for the initial chemical stuff to burn off before throwing the match in and roasting the marshmallow on it, of course. Eventually, we resort to adding some newspaper to the little ashtray in the middle of the living room, right next to a fireplace, to keep it going long enough to actually roast a marshmallow. We're using forks to do the roasting, which we think is cool because, on a full-blown fire, you'd have to use a real stick or something longer. We're really smart, we think, and we have invented the next big thing. Occasionally the fire did die out in certain parts of the giant ashtray. There are 2 of us trying to roast marshmallows, so of course that side needs to be reinvigorated with more matches, right? Only fair. So for a couple of minutes we're trying to see who can roast his marshmallow perfectly. To do that, you require your own little area of the fire. And tending to that required a perfect mix of newspaper, matches, and blowing on it. To be honest, I don't know who threw the last matchstick, because the first few seconds are a blur except tink, and a strange sensation on my foot. Really had no idea what happened. And when I did figure it out, there was fire on my sock. It was only a couple of seconds later that I realized that the ashtray had exploded, and that there was fucking magma and burning matches and burning newspaper all over the carpet, some on the couch, some on the VCR, everywhere. As calmly as possible, for a person of my demeanor, I said, "Holy shit!" and started swatting at my sock. Jay, meanwhile, had risen and stepped back, was staring at the scene completely confused, like, holy shit. Mastro RVM's sock is on fire, but holy shit, what the fuck just happened in other areas too? Shortly after I got my sock off, we sprang into action, each taking different routes to water sources. I ran to the bathroom and grabbed the cup that they keep their toothbrushes in. Jay to the kitchen and filled a pot. I should say that my route was obstructed by burning stuff, so I went the only sensible route that I could choose. And Jay had the edge on getting towards the kitchen. All the time we're yelling to each other, holy fuck, what happened? We eventually extinguish the fires. The damage is done though. The ashtray is completely destroyed, has exploded. It formerly resided on Jay's parents' coffee table, so we're going to have to figure out how to explain that. Eventually, we couldn't come up with an explanation, we're probably too exhausted, and just pretended that didn't happen. Next, the burnt carpet. Actually, and surprisingly, the area under the ashtray was not burnt so bad. The area just around it was like a bomb had gone off, albeit a small bomb. And everywhere that bomb sent shrapnel was now doused in water. The VCR we just had to beat out because we didn't want to do any damage to it. Sensitive electronic equipment and water don't mix, yo. By now it's 2 AM. Jay's mom gets off work at 4 and will be home by 4:30. Our course of action was clear. After much discussion, vacuum up the water in a shop vac, and then shave off the burnt fibers of the carpet. We set about scratching off in the finest way possible at first, but eventually just dragging the knives across the burnt bits of carpet. There were probably 30 areas that had been on fire, and there was a significant circle of carpet in the middle of the explosion that was obvious. Not too obvious, but obvious. Just a few feet from the fireplace, mind you. We actually went and got the dog's brush and distributed hair around the epicenter to disguise it to look like dust bunnies. We were still working on this stuff when she pulled up. We made some precautions, like putting away the shop vac, and ran to bed. She came in and put away her stuff. We were upstairs but could hear her, and complained that she knew we'd made a fire. This is freaking June and it was warm outside, we can't blame her. We'd left a couple of the charred forks somewhere in the kitchen. The next morning she confronted us. We didn't give her the whole story about the stupidity of building a fire in an ashtray, or even acknowledge the destruction of the ashtray. But I did cop to smoking cigarettes in the house. At this point she didn't know that Jay was a smoker at all, so she said I couldn't come over for the rest of the summer, and Jay couldn't come over to mine, which really blew in those days. She never punished Jay either, so at least he didn't get found out. We did a good job of cleaning that shit up. She was a single mom at that time, living in a really too big house with a lot on her plate. She must have figured something out though. All through high school, Jay and I would hang out in public, but when I went over to their house I was pariah number 1. She remarried a complete dick that would fuck with me constantly, fuck with my friends too. She sold that house and moved elsewhere. The same stuff continued. That burnt marshmallow fork. Four. This isn't actually my TFU, it's my stepfather's, though I was there for it and helped, somewhat, with the cleanup. And it didn't happen today, rather a good few years back. I was around 17 or 18 and was living at home with my mom, stepdad, and sister. My sister was around the age of 1 and was sleeping in my mom and dad's bedroom in her cot. On my dad's side of the room, this is important. Now, when my stepdad and co go out, they drink a decent amount, to put it nicely, and this time was no exception. On this particular night, I would say it was around 1 in the morning when I heard my stepdad fumble into the house after a night out. Now, I can't recall if I was on the PC downstairs in the back room, which is directly beneath my mother and stepdad's bedroom, or in my own bedroom, but I listened as my stepdad, rather inebriated, came up the stairs to their room, where my mom and sister were asleep, and heard the general bumps of someone getting ready to go to bed. Then all was quiet. After a little time passes, I hear noise, and not 10 seconds later I hear my mom going potty at my stepdad, and hear more of the earlier noise. I get up and head to my parents' bedroom, all while listening to my mother give my stepdad a thorough tongue lashing, and knock on the door. I hear my mom shout for me to enter in an exasperated tone. I opened the door, not prepared for the scene that awaited me. There was my dad looking worse for wear on a bed, with my very visibly pissed off mom looking madder than a box of frogs. I turned to see my little sister standing in her cot, covered in I didn't know what until I got closer. Then I smell it, and put two and two together. The noise I'd heard earlier was retching. Oh no, I hear you cry. But oh yes, my stepdad had been sick on my little sister. I looked at her, standing there in her cot, covered in vomit, and she looked up at me with what looked like pleading in her eyes. I went to her, took off her wet sleepsuit, left her in the cot, turned to my mom, distracted her from angry yelling, telling her I was going to clean up my sister and for her to sort the cot. By the time I had bathed, dried, and redressed my sister, I walked back to my mom and dad's room to find the cot mattress on its side and my dad gone from the bed. My mom took my sister, thanked me for my help, and put my sister where my stepdad normally slept, settled her down, and asked me to turn the lights off as I left. But where was your stepdad, I hear you ask? Sent to sleep on the sofa because my sister's bed was too wet for her to sleep in, so she got his side of the bed. My sister is 13 now, and my mom, sister, and me look back and share this story with friends and family from time to time, and have a good chuckle. 5. This TIFU happened a few months ago. I should preface this by saying that I have a stomach condition that's chronic, no cure, and I usually have it pretty well controlled. It essentially makes me have the stomach of a severely morning-sick pregnant woman. My fiancé and I are huge Star Wars fans, so December 1st we pre-ordered tickets to see an early release of Star Wars: The Last Jedi. The showing was set for 10:30 p.m. I hadn't taken any of my pills that day, I was almost out, and wanted to make it through the week. Whilst laying with my fiancé before the show, I started to doze off around 8 p.m. I usually take Adderall in the morning for my ADHD, so I decided to take half a dose to stay awake. I also decided to take 2 Zantac to try and keep my stomach from acting up during the movie. I didn't take my usual probiotic pill since I usually end up in the bathroom at some point in the night, and I didn't want my bowels to interrupt Star Wars. I also had run out of my anti-nausea meds. We head over to the theatre. The AMC near us has been doing renovations, ending in more drink machines, better lighting, more food, recliner seats, and a full-service alcohol bar. I see it and think, oh nice, you can get drunk before your movie. At no point does it cross my mind that maybe people can take the alcohol into the theatres. We get our usual 2 drinks, 1 popcorn. We go sit in our assigned seats. I'm ecstatic about the movie. I'm chatting quietly with my fiancé about our fan theories when a smell hits me that makes me gag. A man had just come and sat next to me with a full cup of beer. Now, I understand the appeal of alcohol. If it was any other alcohol, I would have no problem, but I cannot stand the smell of beer. The problem is, I can't switch with my fiancé. He's deaf in his right ear and is legally blind. He can tell what's happening in the movie, but the scene at the beginning with all the words and any subtitles, I will have to read to him. I turn to the man and ask him if him and his wife could possibly switch seats. I explain that I can't handle the smell of his beer and it's making me nauseous. He's already drunk and refuses quite loudly to my request. The woman pipes up that she's claustrophobic, which is why they chose aisle seats. I pull up the armrest between my seat and my fiancé's seat, then scoot as far away from the alcohol as possible. My fiancé knows what I'm doing, so he puts his arm around me. I can still smell it, but it's not overpowering, so we stay like this. The movie starts and it's about an hour and a half into the movie. I'm munching away on popcorn and soda when I hear snoring beside me. I look over, dude is passed out. I roll my eyes and snuggle closer to my fiancé. 20 minutes after he fell asleep, he lets out the biggest belch I've ever heard at a movie theatre. A few seconds pass, then I smell it. His beer, his popcorn, even his dinner. I felt my stomach clench painfully. I knew I had minutes. I jump up, about to run, but him and his wife both have their footrest up. I was stuck. Another painful clench and my popcorn and soda comes back up, and all over the married couple's legs. I grab their popcorn bucket as the second wave hits. At this point, the woman is screaming and retching. The man has awoken and was screaming profanities, all while I'm vomiting into their popcorn bucket. Luckily, they had gotten an XL popcorn and ate most of it. Someone, bless their hearts, got a theatre worker to come help. The man is screaming for me to be arrested. I'm 75% sure you can't get arrested for accidentally throwing up on someone. The woman is demanding monetary compensation for the ruined night and ruined clothes. Meanwhile, I'm sitting with my head between my knees, their bucket beside me, in case another wave of vomiting hits. My fiancé explains my condition, and that we try to get them to move or switch spots. The manager ends up giving them a $50 gift card, a $50 gift card to us, and lets us know they're working on having some alcohol-prohibited viewings in the future. Poor guy had to refund a number of tickets because of all the commotion that we caused. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to whatever the hell video this is. Oh, there we go. 5 True Embarrassing Stories, episode 65. See, I'm very organized today. I'd like to thank everybody who allowed me to use their stories and sent in stories for use in this video. The last 2 were subscriber stories, and it wasn't deliberate that they were both vomit-based. You know, story number 4. Some say that stepfather is still sleeping on the sofa all these years later. You can hear him retching mournfully in the night. Okay, I'm going to head off for now. That's enough messing about. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.